We say something like accountability is the greatest form of care, because I think it is. And I think that's what our customers deserve. And it's not going to happen unless it happens from us, then to the investor, from the investor to the manager, manager to coaches, then finally coaches to consumers, right? That's the play, but it's got to start at the top. Matt.
What's up?
You, brother. What's cracking?
It's another day, man. About to head out of town. Got to open up a couple more clubs.
Yeah, you're heading to Dallas, right?
Dallas.
So are you gonna visit the current clubs and?
I'm gonna see most of the open clubs out there, and we got another club opening, and we have two opening up there soon. But it's happening place. I think is that the most highest location?
I think
sold?
Dallas, Atlanta has a good deal, but Dallas has more. I think we're in the 20-somethings in Dallas.
Yeah, there's a lot in Dallas.
Yeah,
Dallas is cool.
Yeah.
Aren't you from that area?
Yeah, I'm from Dallas originally. Yeah. I mean, it's been so long. Everyone's like, "Hey, where are you from?" There, I'm like, I don't even know what it's like now. But I grew up around an area I was actually born in Texarkana, and within like a week was in Dallas. So I was born on the Texas side of Texarkana, which is important apparently. And then, because like the highway like splits it, like Arkansas, Texas, right? I was born on the Texas side, and then immediately to Dallas, and we lived around White Rock Lake area, which apparently was bad, and now it's come back. But I mean, I'm old, so it was 100 years ago.
Yeah, it was a long time.
It was indeed quite a long time, folks. Well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. Do you have a dad joke for us today?
I do. I don't think anybody said this one, including you. People in Athens rarely get up before sunrise. Dawn is tough on Greece.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
What do you mean?
It's terrible. Like, it's not. God, I guess if it's that terrible, it's actually good.
That's the whole point.
I know, but like it's so bad. All right, so my doctor said that I might die because I accidentally consumed clay.
What?
I mean, I'm shitting bricks, honestly.
I think you've said that one.
I haven't. No, I've never said that.
Probably said that.
I promise you.
We're going to have to go back and listen to all 2020.
I'm very selective with my little bit of swearing, but not too much, as always. So
it's probably mine.
It is. But what we are going to talk about today, and I think it's an important topic, is accountability.
What's that?
I'm just one of those words you yell out. Accountability. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, somebody quoted me on this the other day, which we had this conversation earlier, inspired me to talk about it today, which is that it's the highest form of care. And I do believe that.
Yeah.
Let's look at it through the lens of a parent. Like, you've got girls, you're trying to keep some guardrails around them to keep them safe. You're not always making decisions that they like. I mean, your oldest is 13, 12? 12. Okay, so a couple more years, it's like, hey, Dad, can I go to this party? And it's like, if you find out that their parents are out of town, you're like, no, I'm not letting you go at 15 to a party where there's alcohol and maybe drugs or whatever, and the parents are out of town. Like, no shot, right? Well, that's not going to be a popular decision from you, but that's accountability in the best way. And it's tough to be a parent like that. But I think in so many ways that manifests itself in a business, but that's just a high-level example. Would you agree as a father?
But what if I want to be the cool dad?
Yeah, well, you're going to have terrible kids. So.
No, I mean, 100%. I mean, it's. I always correlate those two when folks come to training, right? Whether you're praising your kids for doing something good or holding them accountable and making sure they understand that what they were doing is not appropriate.
Yeah, and I think there's 3 levels of accountability, which is the way we're going to discuss it today. So we'll say we're going to use an alloy as an example, but if you're not an alloy and you're just a business owner or whatever, it's very similar. So for us, there's 3 layers. It's the investor level of accountability.
Yep.
And the investor holding we'll just, for the sake of this conversation, manager. Now, we call that the director of training, which is a consumer-facing term because people would rather see the head, the number one person training-wise than they would the manager, and I'm air quoting. So investor to manager, and then manager to coaches, and then coaches to clients. So accountability is a cultural thing that you set up that passes through all different aspects of the business. I mean, you could argue that it even starts maybe us to franchisees, like, in that parent-child relationship, not saying that in a derogatory way. We're also trying to keep guardrails up and to keep people to kind of, stay the course, because we have spent 32 years in the industry and we know what it's like if you try this or you try that, or you want to change your pricing to something that might be too low or something that's too high. Or, I mean, look, there's a million things that we're trying to do to get our customers and our franchisees, franchise partners to be successful. And so there's some accountability there. Now, ultimately, though, it is their business, right? And they have to be accountable to themselves first and foremost. They have to understand, like, this is my business. I will live or die by my decisions and how I run my team. And yes, there is a bicycle that's been built for me, and that would be the franchise, and we've built a pretty darn good one, but I still have to get on it and pedal the bike, right? And I love that analogy, which we use a lot. So let's talk about the first level of accountability in an alloy, which you could, again, extrapolate that into any other type of business, but investor to manager. So what are some things, Matt, as our VP of all operations, and you're running a franchise business coaching team, what are some things that you see that are effective or necessary, I should say, for the investor to hold the manager or the director of training same accountable in an alloy?
What are some things? Well, I mean, it's overall running a business, right? Like you're running, obviously, our whole franchise, right? You have a thorough understanding of what's supposed to be done. You may not be doing all the functions, but you know how it's supposed to be from numbers of processes, and you are making sure that those things are happening on a day-to-day basis, right?
Right.
So, I mean, what I see normally is our good investors are really engaged in terms of their meeting with their directors daily, talking about sales, talking about numbers, meeting with weekly with the leadership team, talking about overall marketing and everything else that goes with it. So you're very involved and you know the ins and outs of everything supposed to be going on. Right.
So like another way to put that might be like there are KPIs, key performance indicators in your business. You're aware of what those are. You know where to find them. And you're holding your director, who's the face of that one location of yours, even if you have multiples, you have one in each, right? You're holding that person accountable to those KPIs, correct?
Yeah, 100%.
So if you get a certain amount of leads, like how many of those got booked, how many showed up, how many did we close, what was our retention rate last month? And there's lots of ways to go about that, which we teach you to hold them accountable. Now, like you said, our good investors that it just turns out their performance is also better are the ones that are willing to lean in and hold their team accountable. Without being super negative, what have you seen from facilities where the investor doesn't hold the team accountable?
Yeah, I mean, the clubs that would not be doing as well as the others, typically the scenario is, I hired this person, they know best, they know better than I do, so I trust them, right? As opposed to owning your business and knowing what's supposed to happen and not holding them accountable and just getting their feedback from the actual director.
You want my take on that?
Sure.
It might not be the best take for people that are in that situation.
Sure.
I think it's a lack of conviction to have really hard conversations with people, right? Like the path of least resistance is always the most attractive. I think if you ignore behaviors, I'll give you an example. Let's say that a club that they don't have a good lead to conversion ratio, right? And when you look at all the tools that we have in place that make it very transparent as to what's happening in the business, there may be a huge gap in, say, response time to leads or performance on phone calls to get them booked and get them to the gym, right? Now, everybody has access to that. We have it and the investors have it, right? If we're reporting to the investor, hey, this metric doesn't look good. First of all, you should know it before we do. It's your business. And we've already taught you how to pay attention to it, right? You can reach out anytime with a question. But if you're not on top of that at your level, then of course you're not going to be able to hold anyone accountable. Now, let's say that you're not. And we're like, okay, well, what can we do to help you understand it better? Because here's where you are. And we point out that maybe the manager is not performing at the level that is expected to make the facility successful, and the investor chooses to do nothing about it. I think there's different reasons for that. One of them is just hard. It's hard to hold people accountable. It is. And the second would be, to your point, maybe they feel like they're held captive by the the expert, and I'm air quoting that, in the business. But what you have to remember is in a franchise, we're already handling all that. Like, we handle all the programming, we have the sales process. Like, we're the expert. We built the bicycle. You don't need them to come in and build a different bicycle for you, right? You just need to run the play, and the play is really well defined. So I tend to call a little bit of BS on that as an excuse. I think it's really just not willing to lean into the business and have hard conversations. So if you have someone who isn't performing well and you sit down and you're like, this is the expectation, like, I've heard the calls or I'm seeing the lack of response time, what's going on here? And, they have plenty of bandwidth to do it or whatever. And there's just starts making excuses. The leads are bad, or, this is hard, or nobody wants to do this or whatever. It's your job as the investor and the leader to hold that person accountable, to say, okay, well, what tools do you need to be successful? We're going to go another 30 days, and these metrics need to improve, and they need to improve from here to here, right? And we need to be hitting our percentages.
Right.
If we're not, we're going to have to talk. Now, I think you can do it. I hired you to do it, but I'm holding you accountable. I'm happy to give you any bandwidth you need. We've got a franchisor behind us that's fully supporting us all the time, right? But we need to make a change. Like, this behavior has to change. The claim is that that they're fearful of doing that because they don't want to lose that person. But the fact is, they just don't want to have the hard conversation. And believe me, I've had to do it at every level, from hiring people at 22 years old that were twice my age to now, which is a much bigger company, right? There's stages of that. But every stage along the way, you had to be willing to have those hard conversations, right? And we always use the phrase, hard conversations now or harder conversations later. Because if you ignore it, it's not going to get better.
Right.
And I will argue, because if you've got the right person in the seat, if you use the best work data and you use the GWC hiring process with, you've got a good person in the bus. Whether they're in the right seat or not, that's yet to be determined. Maybe they're a better head coach if they don't have the skill set or they'll want to, right? But to me, it's the ultimate form of care, because you care enough to have that hard conversation. If we talk about this through the lens of, like, you have a family member who's doing stupid stuff, or you have a good friend that's just screwing up their whole life, right? Are you the friend that's like, yeah, bro, cool, and you just high five them and you kind of laugh it off, and then when they leave, you're like, whoa, that dude's really fucking up, right? Or are you the friend that sits them down and says, look, man, like, I really care about you. You're not doing this well at all, right? There's very few people who have the guts to do that, but if they do it, if you're the one that's on the receiving end of that, you got a really good friend there, right? Even if you feel like they're off target, they do it because they care about you. They don't do it because they want to be a jerk. They're not. The jerk doesn't say anything because they don't give a shit about you, and then they gossip behind your back, right? The person that really cares about you, they have it now. And you and I have talked about, we both played sports, right? You played at a much higher level than I did, but every coach that we ever really admired in hindsight was somebody who they made you a little bit scared. Like, you see them in the hallway and you're like, ooh, because, boy, they were going to hold your feet to the fire, right? And when you look back on it, you really appreciate that. Those kind of coaches usually get way more out of people than ones who are just sort of passive aggressive, or they don't just come right at you with facts, right? Everybody knows the facts. You just got to speak them to people. So I think that people are avoiding hard conversations because they don't want to have them, and they're doing it under the guise of, like, well, they're the experts, so, like, I just have to default to them. It's like, no. I don't see it that way. I call BS because I've been in their shoes and I've hired people that know more than me about their functions, but I still know what the performance should do, and I need to hold them accountable to that. And even if I can't tell them technically, if I can't do the role better than them, it doesn't matter. They're hired to do the role. I mean, you look at our company now, we were hiring people that are so good at different functions, like you and your functions. I couldn't do your job, but I know what the results of your department should be producing, right? Sure. So I can still hold you accountable, even though I don't even know, I couldn't sit in your seat. I saw a great clip from Andy Stanley, and he was like, the bigger your organization gets, the dumber you get. Meaning you're hiring experts at specific roles, and there's no shot that you can know as much about them.
Sure. There's no way.
Roles. You can't. But it doesn't mean that you abdicate your leadership, to them and just, I don't know. I mean, like you say, yeah, you can ask them their opinion. You're all working as a team, but if it's just not getting done, you got to have a hard conversation, right? Same thing in our business. And I think when you look at one of our core values is sincere candor. And the reason we have that in there is because we want to be able to have, from a place of care and a mutual win, we want to have hard conversations with franchisees. We want them to have hard conversations with their director or manager if they're needed. And I promise you, if you do it from a place of care and a common win, it will be well received. I mean, you look at what happened at corporate, right, with, like, Kian. He was a little bit struggling. Like, we were just sort of left him out there and, like, hey, you're the corporate guy, right? And then, like, we would try to coach him as a franchisee. But when you really looked at it, like, we're the investor group. It's like, all right, let's invest in him like we would if we owned the gym, which we do own the gym, right? And so we just turned up the accountability. And it was like very specific questions like, how many businesses are we doing cross promotions with? Are you running the 3 steps? Well, I did this. No. The 3 steps. Can you run the 3 steps? Recite them to me. Okay, good. So you have it. So you're just not doing it. That's different. So why aren't you doing it? Well, I mean, okay, will you do it this month? Yes, I will do it, right? And it took 4 to 6 months to really dial that in, but it like mitigated some churn, and it boosted our numbers by another 10% or so.
And Ken's probably much happier.
Well, that's the thing. Like when you talk to him, what you think about those hard conversations is that like people are like, ugh, like you walk out of the office and they don't like you as much. And that need to be liked is also an issue, right? Whereas with him, he'll leave and be like, thanks so much for investing in me. Because when we do it, it's not like you suck, get better. It's literally like, yo, we're in this together, bro. Do you need more resources? Like, how can we help you? Right. But there's a job that has to be done and you have to do that job. And so it worked. And if you got the right person in the right seat and he's the right guy, they really appreciate it. They feel invested in, not picked on. Right. But if you feel like you're picking on them, it may manifest itself that way. So it's a lot of it's just head trash.
Do you remember where you got the phrase, because I use it all the time, you get what you allow?
I don't even think I came up with that.
Yeah, you did. You say lots of things. Pretty old.
Yeah. Well,
but
I appreciate that.
I use it. I use it a lot because it's like we don't have hard conversations. And if you just let, like better terms, the inmates run the asylum, things would go sideways and that just becomes your business. But you let that happen.
Where was that from? I think it was from a book because I remember the story around it more than I remember like the source. And the story was they profiled like a new person in a company. Mm-hmm. And that person shows up first day on the job. They show up early. They got their stuff together, blah, 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 right? And then over time, they're looking around and people are kind of showing up late and they're not leaning in. And then they profile a day in the life of on day one and how good this person is and the day in the life of, say, 6 months down the road. Right. And they show up late. They spend the first hour and a half of their day checking their emails and their social media accounts. Then they do this and they take an extended lunch and then, whatever that thing was, right? And basically the statement that came out of that was you get what you allow.
Yeah, which you let that culture become that way. So not only did it affect that person who could have been potentially really good.
Right. So you're doing them a disservice. That's the way you have to look at it, right?
Right. But then what we'll talk about here in a minute is all the downstream effect of what it does to all of your employees.
Yeah. It's a perfect segue because I think it sets the tone for the entire organization. And granted, each alloy facility is a relatively small number of people, both on the team and for the client base. But I will tell you in this trickle-down effect that you mentioned, if the investor or the owner doesn't lean in to the manager, you can't then expect the manager to turn and lean into the coaches, right? So like if the manager is not being invested in, held accountable to the play, then they're going to probably be a little bit looser, or I would say definitely be looser with the employees. And that will manifest itself in like coaches, painting outside the lines and doing their own workouts or right. And you're trying to create this, this family feel and we're all friends and all that. And you can do that. You can do that and hold people accountable, sure. Right? And I'll guarantee you, even from manager now or director to coach, same exact conversation. You care enough to lean in to help them be better coaches. So if you see not enough attention paid to form or like, again, Kean does secret shops the coaches, right? And it's like, all right, as a team, we are dropping the ball in this. Now, we're great everywhere else, but the only one area that we're not good in is this. We're not explaining the exercise through the lens of the customer so they understand what the benefit is to them. Because some of functional training can be odd. So it's like, why am I doing this thing with this kettlebell thing? It's like, oh, this is good. And just speak to it through the client. Oh, it's good for your butt, right? Because you want a better looking booty, whatever. No, this is good for explosive training. It'll help your golf swing. I mean, whatever the conversation needs to be. But if you're not holding your manager accountable, you can't then expect them to turn and hold the coaches accountable to running the play, setting a great customer experience, sticking to the 7 core tenets of great session, doing the pre and post shift. Are they sending out their text messages? Are they doing all these things, right? If you do that, you're not only holding them accountable for the sake of the business, but you're actually making them better coaches. And a lot of these folks, certainly part-timers, they're relatively young at times. They might be moving on to do something else someday, and you should be high-fiving them out the door. But what disservice are you doing them if you're not teaching them how to work, right, and how to work with integrity, right? Again, it's like you look up to that person.
Well, it's just what we do here.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, even just starting out here and through the years, and I still do this, is I always look to, like, I see your interactions, Suzanne's interactions, and everybody else. I always try to like emulate, kind of like, oh, that's what he said there. Like, I listen in, and that's the same thing the coaches are going to do with their directors, and they see what their owners are doing. They see how you interact with clients. They see how you show up to work, you're on time, and like how hard
you dressed ready to go. Are you getting there as the director? Are you getting there early and running your pre and post shift duties? Are you holding them accountable? So you lead by example, and then you also lead by measuring things. And we have all the mechanisms in place.
Like,
to
if
measure.
You don't do it, I don't got to do it.
Well, 100%.
You don't give a shit. Why should I?
Yeah, I mean, great point. Same thing from you could back up a step where we just were. Investor to manager. Like, investor never shows up to any meetings. They only seagull people. Would say swoop in, crap on everything, and fly away. It's like, no, try to be involved and at the level of just like show up for meetings and have a meeting with your director once a week or more often if needed, right? But that's ultimate care if you do it from a place of a common win, right? And they will receive it that way if you do it from that place. If you do it because you're not just nitpicking them and you're not swooping in every 2 or 3 months and yelling at them for no reason, like you haven't shown up at all, right?
Yeah, and what that'll do is it'll create that culture, where we're all together. We're all a part of this, right? Everybody knows where you stand. Like, that's something I always say about you. Like, I talk about leadership and stuff, and I was like, there's never a time I don't know where I stand with Rick,
Well, yeah, but it's like,
but it's the best way, because I'd rather know, right? You don't want to be just sitting there.
Exactly. And we've had the good news is like, you own your stuff, right?
Sure.
I'm trying not to swear every time I'm going to own your shit. But you own your stuff.
We got a certain limit on the podcast.
But like, if there's something that I think that needs to be done, I'll come to you. And what I appreciate is like, we both know, like, I have nothing but respect for you. I think you're the smartest person in your position in fitness franchising, period. And I really mean that. And I've met a lot of people. And so, like, I would be remiss to approach you from a place of like, I know better. I don't, but I might have an idea and I might push you really hard on it. And if you think it's a bad idea or whatever, you push back just as hard. So there's like a mutual respect there that goes a long way. But I'm not going to have a hard conversation, and you're not going to have it with me. I mean, you've made some really interesting, like we got rid of our pre-sale team, right, as an example. Why? Because you're looking at data, and the data shows that people that leaned on us too much, they got drunk on support, which is one of our franchisees said that, which I loved, right?
Yeah.
And that it was too much support, and so they never learned how to do anything. It's like we conceived the baby, we labored the baby, we had the baby, we raised it for a minute, and then we handed it and go, here's your baby. And they're like, oh, I don't know what to do with this thing. It's like, all right, so that's what the data was showing. So I'm all excited because it's like this thing, and it's great on the sales end, which is where I spend most of my time. And you're like, yeah, dude, I'm getting rid of it. And it was like, you remember it was a big like, what do you do? What? Push back this and that. But you stood your ground and you explained why. And as soon as you explained why, I'm like, oh, that makes total sense. Well, let's deep six it then, 100%, sure. Right?
But you can only have those kind of things if that's the culture you create.
Right. And really, I think a better word for that, Matt, is like trust, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be unreasonable about something, and you know that I have respect for you. You have respect for me. We understand our roles, but there's trust there. Like, you can come to me with a really hard conversation, and I might like fly off the handle like you teased me about, like kill the messenger. But at the same time, like, I'm going to listen to you ultimately, right? And you're the expert at what you do, and I'm going to appreciate that hard conversation, especially when it's coming from you, right? Mm-hmm. So, but that's a culture that takes time to build that. But you do that by showing up regularly, and there is accountability. Like, you have that you hold me accountable, right? Like, I'm accountable for steering the company right, trying to make good decisions on where we're going. I'm counting on you to make the club successful after they come to training and for the next 10 years. It's like, great. That's what we're working on. So anyway, that's just an example of us. But if the investor leads the manager correctly, the manager then learns how to lead, and they will, at the same pace and with the same level of conviction and care, will lead their manager or their coaches, right? Yep. Now, the third step, and this is what's really interesting to me, is if that's the culture and it comes from the investor through the director to the coaches, guess where the last step of accountability is? And it's literally what we do, right?
The clients.
100% clients. Like, can the coaches hold the clients accountable? If the coaches are being held accountable from a place of care by the director manager, they're going to do the same thing with the customers, right? If it's sort of flippant, like, oh, it's okay, no big deal, and you're soft about it and you don't have hard conversations, your coaches aren't going to have hard conversations with clients, which I will say is absolutely necessary at times. Do you agree?
100%.
You have somebody comes in your office, they're like, oh, they just spent a month eating their way across Italy, and it's like, and we've all been there, we're all humans, and they say, I'm just going to take a little break. This isn't working for me anymore. Like a good director, and you sat in that seat forever, you'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, but this comes from a place of care. Like, you would do anything to help that person, and they feel that, right? Sure. And you're like, what are you talking about? Like you lost a ton of body fat. Your knee pain is almost gone. Your back's feeling better. Just because you took a month off and lost your motivation, it doesn't mean you need something different or new. You just need to do the thing, right? And when you explain it that way logically, you're not explaining it from a place of like, I'm trying to retain this revenue from you, right? That's not where it comes from. Now, that's the byproduct, and that's not bad, of course. But it comes from a place of like, I would do anything to help you, including telling you you're full of crap. I don't believe this story, and that you're just not in a good place with your fitness right now. But you need to get back on it. Like, let's go, chop, chop. Let's go. I always coach that way. You always coach that way. And we had very successful clients, and that's what built the whole business, essentially, right?
Sure.
That's how it started, was like we held people ultimately accountable. But if you don't learn how to do that, and it's not being done to you at some point in your life, right? Certainly in that same facility, you're not being held accountable to be a great coach. You're not going to hold the clients as accountable, I can promise you. Now, you might be wired that way, and that's great. But let me give you an example. If a coach is that way, so say that in an alloy, you've got a director and a head coach. If the head coach is just an absolute stud, right, or studette, and they are holding all the clients accountable, and they're wired that way. If the manager director isn't the same person to that, leading a coach that's that dynamic, that coach is on short time. They're not going to stay there because they're going to look around and be like, I'm an eagle. I'm around a bunch of ducks. I'm out. Right?
Sure, yeah. Working harder than everybody else in here.
Yeah. Like I've got this all figured out. Like I could be in that guy's seat, that whole idea, right? And so it's insidious how it can creep in if you're not careful. And if you do it well, it's like, man, it becomes the whole culture. It passes down from us to, and we're trying to build leaders. We want our investors to be leaders, and we're telling them, and we're giving them EOS and frameworks and mindsets and books to read and all the things to be good leaders. But you have to step up and be that. If you are, it'll pass through to your manager, director. It'll pass through to the coaches, and then that whole environment of accountability and care will get passed right down to the customers. And I guarantee you they'll have a better customer base. They'll have more clients in there with way less churn and a much better business. Even if the ultimate measure of that is financial, that's how adults keep score. Got it? It's still manifested by care and the willingness to hold people accountable and be uncomfortable.
Just thinking about this reminded me of like a story. I remember when I sat in the director's seat, obviously, like you do a lot of sit down one-on-ones with clients, help them with, with their goals, weight loss, et cetera. And I remember this one specific client. And granted, you can't help all the clients. They're not all going to hit their goals, they have struggles. But I had this one client that I just rode her hard for like weeks and turned into months. And she never reached her goals, right? She just would never do what I told her, wouldn't follow through and stuff. But at the end of it, this lady literally stayed for multiple years as a member. And she would just say, "Oh, I love you. Thank you for trying." And I was like, man, I'm failing here. But she was just so appreciative of the actual accountability and just kind of pushing her along. Right. Even though she's like, yeah, I just can't do it. But she still came back because she knew that she was, at least going somewhat in the right direction. I just find it interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I've never heard that story from you. But what I find interesting about that is exactly what we're talking about. Like, she knew that you were approaching her from a place of care. Mm-hmm. Like you wanted, again, you always say like, I can't want it more than you do. Right. And right now that's through the lens of like, I can't want you to be more successful in your location than you do. You've got to want this, right? But in that seat, it's the very same thing. Like you actually wanted her to reach her goals more than she did. And she recognized that. She didn't see it as, because if it was coming from a place of badgering her because you felt like her lack of success was somehow a reflection on you or making the club look bad or whatever, she would have said like, this guy's a total jerk, right? Sure. But when you came from a place of care, she was like, thank you so much. She's like, thanks for trying. I'm never going to do it, but I really appreciate you.
On the flip side, on somebody that, say, talk about weight loss is a tough journey. If you as a coach or a director is not willing to have a conversation with somebody, that person is heavily going to quit. And what they're going to say is they don't care if I show up or not. They don't care about me. And that is just because you didn't take any effort to show them that, like, try to hold them accountable to with the thing that we're trying to do, which is why anybody gets a personal trainer in the first place.
I mean, we always talk about it. So I sent you that great video from Jeff Bezos, right? Yeah. Where he said, listen, a lot of people ask me, like, I think the person interviewing him was like, hey, what do you see on the horizon? What's new that's coming down the pipe in the next 10 years? He's like, it's a great question. He's like, what a better question is that no one's ever asked me? What's going to be the same 10 years from now that it is now? Yeah. Right. And he's like, listen, I can't imagine a world where someone comes to me and they're like, Jeff, I'm paying too little for the products that I'm receiving. I'd like to pay more. He's like, I don't ever see that. So price, People are always going to want a low price. Check, right? And he's like, second, I never see people saying, you know what, Jeff, I wish the items that I ordered online would show up to my house a little bit slower, right? They're never going to say that.
Speed, yeah.
So if you make the core of the business, if you just put a ton of effort into things that you know are still going to be in play 10 years from now, yeah, there's going to be new things, and that's more like within process and everything else. But it doesn't change the fact that 10 years from now, people are going to want things fast and they're going to want them cheap, period, right? Well, I look at that through the lens of Alloy, and your point made me think of it, where our brand promise is accountability and specificity. Now, the way we do that, it's evolved, vastly in 32 years, and it's going to continue to evolve. We're always looking at new processes and new things we could do to keep people engaged, and AI is coming along, and we're looking at that. I mean, a lot of stuff's coming down the pipe, right? But it doesn't change the fact that 10 years from now, I mean, we've been in business 32 years. It hasn't changed. It was day one till now, 32 years. Same brand promise, right? Accountability and specificity. Mm-hmm. So if one of those two things is accountability, and it's something that's going to be here 10 years from now, and we're going to put as much juice into it as we need to, it's really important. That's why we have the core value of sincere candor, and we say something like accountability is the greatest form of care, because I think it is. And I think that's what our customers deserve. And it's not going to happen unless it happens from us, then to the investor, from the investor to the manager, manager to coaches, then finally coaches to consumers, right? That's the play, but it's got to start at the top.
Yeah, which, I mean, our brand, personal training, we don't hold we have great programs. We know what we're doing on that front, but what we always say, that's not the reason people are here. It's the community and accountability, right?
Yep.
And the reason I know this is because we've had so many clients over the years that literally could be really injured, can't do a lot of stuff. They ain't coming here for the super the workouts that we're doing, right?
Yeah.
It's just
like their PR on a deadlift today.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just literally like these people care about me. They want to see me succeed, and they provide a great customer service, and the community is awesome.
And I make an appointment, so I have to show up. Sometimes It's that simple, right?
Yeah.
Well, we often use the story of like our client of the month a few months back was, at our mothership gym, had been there 28 years. And she started in her 50s, so now she's in her 80s, right? And she's like, hey, I got client of the month finally. And I was laughing. I'm like, hey, congratulations, maybe you'll get it again. She's like, I'll be dead. I was like, okay, good talk. Yeah, talk to you later. I mean, she's hilarious. But do you think in 28 years that person was always on their game and their fitness was perfect? I mean, her husband got cancer and died. She had a business that she exited. She started a new business. She had some health problems, got those. She had a shoulder reconstruction. I mean, up and down and up and down, right? But the accountability to do what you can when you can, like you still got one good arm and legs and a core, like chop, chop, let's go, right? That comes from a place of care, not like I can't lose your membership fee each month. It's the one and the same, but like that's not where it comes from at all, right? At all. And so imagine all the ups and downs that she had to be coached through in her life. It wasn't like always on her game, and it wasn't always about weight loss and six-pack abs. It was like, this is a good thing for me in my life that I can do that it gives me self-efficacy, that I'm still investing in myself, right? Even if in my worst, I can only get here twice a week and I can't even give 60% effort because I'm just stressed to the max. It's like, fine, that's the best you can give, we'll take it. But the accountability to that and us caring enough about that person to hold them accountable, even through those rough times, I mean, you really got to care about somebody to do that, to keep them around that long. That's why our retention is so good in our model. I mean, you look at, again, Kian and corporate and the way that we've been able to coach him and flip his mindset. I mean, we only lost one person last month, right? And that person moved, and that's like a 99.3% retention rate. That's what the brand is about. But you hear, I had him on the podcast. If you didn't listen to that one, go back and listen. Stories of him, caring enough about people to, they're laying mulch this weekend and they have a small car and it's taking them 4 trips to Home Depot. He's like, why don't I just zip down there? We can load up the whole truck. And then he stayed and helped them spread it, and then heard about their background because they're from a different country or whatever, and heard all about their childhood and everything. He compared that to him being from Ireland, and he was like, it was just a great chance to get to know somebody, right? But then he's like, the very next week when they came in, like, so-and-so hasn't been on their game, right? And because now they really know he cares at an obscenely high level, he was able to say, yeah, we're not messing around anymore. Like, even when I was over there the other day, like, we had a beer, got it, but like, you can't be doing that and have a weight loss goal, right? And they're like, oh, God, I should never showed you that, ha, ha, ha. But that level of care, again, on the front end, they know he cares about them. Nobody does that. I mean, what gym does that, right? Helps you spread mulch on the weekend. I mean, come on. That level of care, then you can then hold them accountable. It's like Mike Boyle has always said, and I think it came from someone else before him, but I've heard him say it a million times. Like, people don't care how much you know, until they know how much you care, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if this whole accountability thing comes from a place of like you care about these people as individuals and you're willing to have hard conversations, like that's it. That's the juice, man. And that will pass all the way through from us to franchisees. And I feel like we do a good job of that. They're maybe not always ready to hear it. Maybe they don't want to make tough changes because it's tough in the business, or I like these people. That's a likable person. I'm like, it is, but they're not doing their job, and you're not doing them any service by not holding them accountable.
Right.
Because in that accountability is care, and you're going to teach them a skill that whether it's you or not, they'll take that skill and move forward and you'll be able to do a lot of good things with it. So
one thing you said there, like accountability is care. It's not accountability with fear, right? So I always talk to people. It's like, when you're looking at people that cancel the gym, you'll lose some people over time. I always want you to look at it for the lens of like, all right, did we do all the things to help that person be successful, right? Did we help them reach their goal? Were they using the club? Did they get a part of the community, right? So from accountability standpoint, from the top all the way down, it's like, you're not scaring somebody into like, oh my God, I got to keep this revenue. These people can't leave. If you come at it from what you're doing with, say, Kian, like, are we taking care of our customers, right? Are you doing the right thing to make sure they're successful? Yeah. It's a different way to kind of look at it.
Well, what's funny is it's like, it's the mindset, right? It's the sincere candor idea, our core value, because you're accomplishing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not lost on anyone listening to this that better customer retention leads to higher groundswell of numbers over time, right? Less marketing dollars, so it's more profitable. The whole thing, right? All that's great. That's great business metrics. But you don't approach it that way. You approach it from a place of extreme care, which means really hard conversations, right? About whether it's fitness goals or performance as employees, whatever those things are, right? It's not easy, but also from an investor standpoint, like if you want to grow as a person, and I'm big on like self-help journey disguised as a business, right? This could be a area of your life where you could grow quite a bit. And sometimes that's looking in the mirror and that self-realization of like, you know what, I'm not leading really well right now. I'm not having hard conversations. I'm sweeping them under the rug and hoping for the best, right? And then that never manifests itself well in the long term. And your employees or your team members, they get it.
Right.
They know. Like if the metrics aren't being met, they know they're not meeting them, right? If no one's holding them accountable, maybe they're just not the right person, but maybe also they're like, okay, well, maybe they really don't know what to do. Maybe they do want you to step in and hold them accountable. And that to them is like, well, at least you're paying attention to me now, right?
Right.
Do you agree?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's only so many self-driven people that'll just automatically run the show. I mean, I know there's some out there, but
well, and I think
it's flipping a coin.
And it's teaching too. So it's our job to teach as best we can the business owners to be business owners, and some of them have not done that as entrepreneurs before. So we try to give you that skill set, but you got to grab the ball and run with it, right? And then it's your job as you learn to be a better leader to teach your manager how to lead those coaches. And then you're then by default teaching the coaches how to lead the client. So anyway, those are the three layers that we see in an alloy or any gym business is you've got investor to manager, manager to coaches, coaches to clients. And man, I'm telling you, if you can get that right, it starts at the top. And in this case, the top would be the investor of that particular facility. If you got multiples, you got to do it for all of your directors, right? Man, you'll have an amazing business and you'll feel really good about it. And you'll feel good about how you are wired and how you lead, right? You won't be the cool parent whose kids are in rehab. You'll be the parent who has worked really hard. I mean, that's not always the case, but you'll be the parent who worked really hard and see the fruits of your labor. And you weren't the popular person, but when your kids get to be in their 30s and they look back, they're going to be like, you know what? You were kind of a jerk, but I really appreciate it. Kept it on the rails.
Word.
So anyway, I know we're beating a dead horse at this point, but you good with that?
I'm good.
Anything
I feel
else
good.
to add?
No.
Have you been
got
led?
like a little something on your lip there.
What is it?
I don't know.
A little spittle? What is it?
Like white.
A little dip? Oh, it's cocaine. Sorry. I usually do it in the nasal passages, but I've been a little stuffy, so I just eat it with a spoon now.
Thought you're going to get dry mouth on me.
Yeah. Oh, like those old folks that get that like build up on the corners of the mouth. Ugh, that's gross. Anyway, all right. On that note, check you. I hope this helps you guys. Matt, it's good to have you back in the studio. You spoke a little bit today, and I wasn't opposed to it as much as I normally am. So.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anyway, catch you later. Peace.